What would Martin Luther King say if he saw Christian there, binoculars in hand, looking for birds in the heart of New York, while nature unfolded before him with the same delicacy that he carried in his eyes? What would he say when he saw the peace of this black man being taken away, not with a weapon, but with the simple phone call of a white woman? What would he feel, you tell me, upon hearing that voice laden with fabricated panic scream, "I'm being threatened by an African-American man"? He would know. He would see what that means. And it's not just about a park, nor about a loose dog. It's about what you carry in your skin and what people expect you to be because of it. Martin Luther King would say that there is a violence that doesn't bleed, but suffocates. And this violence is as old as chains, but so subtle that it hides in the gestures many pretend not to see. You don't need a club. You don't need a cell. Just a lie, sustained by an entire history of silence and collusion. Just a look that distrusts before understanding. Just a voice that accuses before listening. Just the weight of color. Do you know what it's like to live under the constant expectation of appearing harmless? Do you know what it's like to measure your steps to avoid causing alarm? Do you know what it's like to smile to be accepted, speak softly to avoid seeming aggressive, lower your eyes to survive? This is where racism hides today. No longer in separate buses, but in the idea that your black body is a walking threat, even when you just want to look at a bird. And Martin Luther King would say, "We do not bleed less because of it." He would see Amy Cooper and understand everything before she opened her mouth, because this woman was not afraid. She was in power, and she used that power, as many have throughout the centuries, to bend the narrative in her favor, because she knew that just saying a black man would make the gears start turning in her favor. Martin Luther King would know that once again, the name of a black man was synonymous with danger. And this is not new. This is heritage. Martin Luther King would say that it's not about a mistake. It's about a system. And this system has taught that the fear of a white person is worth more than the truth of a black person, that the accusation of a white woman weighs more than the dignity of a black man with a camera in hand. And you need to see this, you need to feel this. Because if you don't feel it, it's because maybe you still allow yourself the luxury of not needing to. Martin Luther King would see the police arrive and remember the many faces that never had the chance to prove their innocence. He would see Christian standing still, like so many others before him, for safety, for strategy, for instinct. Because when your color is your sentence, any movement is interpreted as guilt. Do you understand what it means to not be able to lose your calm? To have to be exemplary while being accused of something you didn't do? To have to record to protect yourself while the other shouts lies? This is not justice, this is survival. Martin Luther King would walk through that park as if walking on memories. Memories of eyes that closed too soon, of names that became hashtags, of promises that were not fulfilled. And he would say that this fight is not about a viral video. It's not about a prison sentence. It's about undoing what was built silently, brick by brick, by fear and by lies. He wouldn't just ask you to be outraged. He would ask you to take responsibility. Because outrage without action is just comfort disguised as empathy, and he knew that. He knew that the silence of the good has always been what sustained the cries of the wicked. Do you see? It's not just about Christian. It's about everyone who doesn't have the privilege of being seen as individuals, everyone who walks into a store and is followed, everyone who crosses the street and scares others, everyone who has to explain their presence, justify their existence, prove their humanity. Daily. And yet they are still called exaggerated. Martin Luther King would say that today's racism doesn't need to raise its voice. It's in the fine print, in the fake smiles, in the doors that close quietly. It's in the difference in treatment, in the opportunities that never come, in the automatic assumptions. It's in those who think it's not that bad because they've never felt it. It's in those who say, "I don't see color," while turning their eyes away when color appears. And when the police leave and Christian is left there, alone with his binoculars, Martin Luther King wouldn't see a victory. He would see survival. And between surviving and living, there's still a chasm. It's this chasm that racism digs every day. You need to understand that this story repeats itself because the script is always the same. The setting changes, the name changes, but the script is memorized. Martin Luther King would say that as long as the color of the skin continues to be a factor of judgment, no progress is real, because progress that doesn't reach everyone is just disguised privilege. And maybe, when Amy backs off, when the police realize the mistake, when the video circulates, you feel that there was justice. But Martin Luther King would remind that true justice is not when we avoid a tragedy, it's when the tragedy was never possible in the first place. And we are still far from that. He would tell you that what happened there is just an echo of everything that still happens. A loud reminder that the ghosts of the past are still alive, with new clothes and polished words, but with the same intention. Are you ready to see this? Are you ready to feel the uncomfortable truth that racism doesn't need to be declared to be deadly? Are you ready to accept that if you're not part of the solution, you're probably sustaining the problem? Martin Luther King would say that the dream is still possible, but only if you wake up. And it's not easy to wake up to a world where your peace can be snatched away by a phrase, where your word is worth less, where your humanity is always in doubt. But that's what needs to happen, the awakening. And it starts here, now, with you deciding whether you're going to look away, or finally look within. Because looking within takes courage. It demands that you stop hiding behind your good intentions. It demands that you face that good intentions. Without transformation, change absolutely nothing. Martin Luther King would say that justice is not fed by symbolic gestures. It is nourished by concrete actions, by painful deconstructions, by choices that tear apart the comfort zone. And that's where the urgency lies. Are you willing to lose privileges to do the right thing? Are you ready to hear what hurts without defending yourself? Are you ready to realize how many times you've been Amy Cooper, even without shouting, even without a phone in hand, just by doubting a black person, just by crossing the street, just by feeling safer with a white face nearby? Martin Luther King wouldn't talk about racism as a problem of bad people. He would talk about it as a structure maintained by normal, ordinary, functional people who crank the gears every day without realizing it, and often even with pride. Because racism is not just hate, it is also neglect, it is also omission, it is also indifference. Can you understand this? That there is a type of violence that doesn't scream but pushes, that doesn't kill with bullets but with absence, that doesn't imprison with handcuffs but with statistics. This is what Christian Cooper experienced there in that park, and what millions experience every day where there are no cameras, where there is no viralization, where there is no police retreating, where there is only the loneliness of carrying skin that the world insists on reading as a threat. Martin Luther King would say that it's not enough to not be racist. That has never been enough. You must be anti-racist. You must fight the root, not the symptom. You must break the silence with attitude, with decision, with presence. It's not enough to say you wouldn't do the same. Ask yourself how many times you've done something and didn't even notice. Ask yourself how many times you've seen and stayed silent. How many times you thought it wasn't about you. But it is about you. It always has been. Because if you can walk in a park without fear of being misunderstood, that is a privilege. And privilege, when ignored, turns into a weapon. Martin Luther King never preached guilt. He preached responsibility. Because when you understand the place you occupy, you can use it to make space for those who never had any. But if you choose to use that place to shield yourself from the conversation, from the pain, from the truth, then you are sustaining the same logic that oppressed during segregation times. And it still lives, it just changed clothes. Do you feel that? Because you need to feel it. Not rationalize, not compare, not justify. Feel. Look into the eyes of those who carry the weight of centuries and have no choice. Racism is not an opinion. It is not an exaggeration. It is not a theoretical debate. It is lived in the skin. It is inherited. It is crossed every day. And Martin Luther King knew this. He carried this in his flesh, in his soul, in his voice. And he also knew that for many people, racism is only real when it makes headlines, when it hurts enough to bother, when it is filmed, when it goes viral. But most of the time it happens without an audience. It happens when a black resume is discarded, when a black child is called aggressive for being expressive, when a black mother panics because her son took 10 minutes longer to get home, when a black woman is called intense for having an opinion, when a police stop turns into Russian roulette. Do you understand what it is like to live under this tension? What it is like to wake up and already know that, for you, the world will not work the same way, that your mistake costs more, that your achievements need to be flawless, that your body is never neutral. Martin Luther King would say that this tension is not imaginary. It is the result of a story that has never been properly told, and when it was told from top to bottom. Of a story that erased black heroes, distorted achievements, and justified pains. A story that makes you surprised when a black person speaks well, holds a high position, or is kind, as if that were not natural, as if it were an exception. And as long as this is an exception, the fight continues. Martin Luther King would say that it is not enough to be moved by Christians' pain if you do not act on it, that it is not enough to share a video if you do not share the discomfort it causes, that it is not enough to repeat, "I have a dream," if you are not willing to transform the nightmare for so many people. Because dreaming is not an escape, it is resistance. It is not accepting as normal that which hurts. It is not staying silent when someone else's pain is conveniently silenced. It is having the courage to confront even your own thoughts, those that you learned without realizing, those that arise when no one is looking. You know what I'm talking about. You've had this thought. You've judged unintentionally. You've been suspicious without reason. You've laughed at a joke that diminished someone. You've benefited from a system that wasn't made for everyone. Martin Luther King never expected purity. He expected truth. He expected action. He expected humility to recognize where we fail, even when we don't notice. And that is why he wouldn't tell you to blame yourself. He would tell you to get up. Because the world doesn't change with regret. It changes with movement, with choices, with confrontations, with the daily decision to not be complicit. Are you willing? Because Christian Cooper didn't choose to be an activist, he just wanted to watch birds. But he was dragged into a reality that his skin couldn't let him forget. And Martin Luther King knew the weight of this choice, of being pushed into a struggle that gives you no rest, that demands your voice, presence, and resistance, even when all you wanted was peace. But it is exactly there that power is born. When you understand that your peace will never be complete as long as it's built on the unrest of others. That your silence, no matter how comfortable it feels, is a choice, and every choice has a side. Martin Luther King didn't preach convenience. He preached truth, even if the truth was hard, even if it drove away those who claimed to be allies but refused to change. He knew that justice without discomfort is just decoration. That equality without reparation is just rhetoric. That inclusion without listening is just appearance, and maybe you think you've seen this before, that this is just another story. But Martin Luther King would say, you did see it, but you didn't want to look. You did hear it, but you didn't want to listen. And now that it's in front of you again, you have the chance to do differently. Not with fancy words, not with ready-made phrases, but with positioning, with presence, with actions, with the courage to say, this is not right, even when everyone around you thinks it is an exaggeration, because racism will never seem real to those who have never had to face it. And that is why the responsibility is collective. Not to divide guilt, but to build a future. Do you want this? Because Martin Luther King did not die for a dream. He died for being bothersome, for threatening the comfort of a system, for demanding what many did not want to give up. And if you truly admire him, you need to understand that his legacy is not in statues, it is in daily choices, in the way you treat others, in what you tolerate, in what you silence. Christian Cooper survived. But how many did not survive? How many were silenced before the video started? How many did not have the chance to explain themselves, to prove themselves, to defend themselves? Martin Luther King would say that as long as a black person's life can be summarized by a misinterpretation, no life is truly protected. So the question that remains for you is, what are you going to do with this truth? Are you going to continue as if it were just another case? Will you justify it? Will you forget it? Or will you move? Because the dream still exists, but it only takes shape when someone decides to wake up. Have you noticed how easy it is to move on when the pain does not reach you? When the wound is not yours? When the threat does not have your face, nor does suspicion weigh on your shoulders? Have you noticed how simple it is to turn the page when the written story does not bear your name but benefits you in the footer? You may think you understood everything, that you already know how racism works, that you've heard enough, that you've seen, that you've lamented, that you've shared. But it's not about that. It's not about seeing. It's not about understanding. It's about placing yourself in the situation. It's about stopping watching and starting to move. Because what you call awareness is sometimes just habit, and what you call empathy is sometimes just the relief of not being in someone else's place. Martin Luther King would say that your neutrality also kills. It kills silently. It kills slowly. It kills when you step back instead of taking a stand. It kills when you stay silent in the face of a joke, a comment, a gesture. It kills when you pass by an injustice because you think someone else will do something, and that someone is never you. Have you ever stopped to think how many times you've ignored it? How many times you've downplayed it? How many times you thought it was an overreaction? That it was whining? How many times you felt uncomfortable hearing about racism but continued with your life because, deep down, you knew it wouldn't affect you? That is why Martin Luther King did not only speak to the oppressors, he spoke to those who watch, who observe, who have the power to transform and choose to preserve. You wonder why racism still exists, but have you ever wondered how many times you have fed it? Not with shouting, not with direct aggression, but in everyday life, in preference, in the benefit of the doubt, in absence, in forgetfulness. That's why this fight is still necessary, because it happens in spaces where no one recognizes it. It's in the hallways, in the benches, in the rooms, in the silent choices, in the invitations that don't come, in the doors that don't open, in the voices that aren't heard. Martin Luther King would say that the greatest obstacle to justice has never been declared hatred, but the passivity of those who claim to be just yet prefer to keep the structure as it is. Have you ever looked in the mirror and honestly asked yourself, what am I doing with my place in this world? Because if you can walk without fear, if you can be heard effortlessly, if you can make mistakes without being condemned, if you can exist without justification, then you carry a power. And that power needs to be put in service of what is right. What are you waiting for? For things to change on their own? For time to resolve it? For laws to suffice? They won't. They aren't enough. They have never been enough. Because what sustains racism isn't just brutality. It's the daily maintenance by those who pretend it no longer exists, by those who get used to inequality, by those who think it's normal for black bodies to always be in the wrong statistics, always in the worst numbers, always with the worst chances. Martin Luther King didn't die for an idea. He died for exposing what everyone knew but preferred not to name. He died because he unmasked the system and showed that the problem goes far beyond explicit violence. It's in the looks, the gestures, the structures, the choices. And those choices are in your hands too. There's no use repeating his phrases if you don't live the values. There's no use quoting speeches if you shield yourself from responsibility. Because the emptiest homage is the one that demands nothing of you. And Martin Luther King made demands. He didn't ask for sympathy. He demanded justice. He demanded presence. He demanded courage. Do you have courage? To stand up when no one else is standing? To be a minority in a conversation? To lose comfort in the name of others' dignity? To put white skin in service of the fight that black skin has been waging alone for centuries? The change you hope for begins the moment you stop hoping. The instant you assume that it is not enough to not be racist. You need to be actively involved in deconstructing all of this. And that means losing. It means giving up. It means listening without defending yourself. It means stopping measuring your kindness by how much you do not offend and starting to measure it by the strength with which you defend. Martin Luther King would look you in the eyes and ask, are you ready to give up your comfortable silence in the name of the truth that hurts? Because the peace you feel while others bleed is not peace. It's privilege. And privilege that does not turn into action is disguised complacency. So the choice is yours. Are you going to continue being a spectator of the pain that does not affect you? Or will you finally be part of the change? Choose. And choose knowing that every non-choice is also an answer.